Act, ask, and adapt. Last 25 years, I've started 2 companies, sold them both, and I'm crazy enough to start another one. And I think the entrepreneurial exercise is the most creative, stimulating enterprise I could possibly imagine. But it's hard. It's really hard. And so I've learned 3 lessons that I want to share with you today that have made it easier for me. Those are act, ask, and adapt. So what do I mean? Well, let's first start with act. To tell you what I mean, I got to tell you a story. So it's 1985, and I'm 23 years old, and I just graduated with an undergraduate degree in mathematics from Florida State University, and my goal is to move up north to a big city and spend my life savings having a great time, which I successfully did in about 3 months, which meant I had to get a job. So I went to an interview for a job, and the job was to do what are called geodetic calculations, and I'm not going to really go into a lot of detail about that, but I'll tell you this. It was a civil engineering firm, and a civil engineering firm that's doing surveys. And when you do surveys for a small plot of land, for a house or a building, all the geometry is Euclidean, which means all the angles are right angles. You can pretend all the angles are right angles. But when you do surveys over much longer distances, you have to take into account the curvature of the earth. Those are called geodetic calculations. So I find myself in the office of this guy interviewing for this job, telling him, hey, I can do geodetic calculations. And he asked me a question. He goes, well, can you program a computer? Now, just to put some perspective on this, this is 1985. So this is a year after the famous 1984 commercial, the Super Bowl commercial from Apple. The IBM PC has only been out for a couple of years. So of course I don't know how to program a computer. But I asked him a question. Does it pay more? And he goes, yeah, it pays $1 more an hour. I'm like, of course I can program a computer. So I spent the next 6 months chest deep in manuals and software and computers, writing software for this company. And I'll share with you a little bit about what we do. In the old days of survey, you used to use a transit and a rod, and you'd write down all of the calculations, and you'd bring them in and type them in and do a calculation from there. But with this, we used a laser and a prism, and we'd store it on solid state memory. So the survey crew would come in from the field, they'd bring this box, and we'd plug it into the computer, and my software would read all the shots off the solid state memory, do a bunch of number crunching, and then produce a working draftsman's drawing on this big mylar sheet we used to print on an HP plotter. So effectively what that means is we took a job that used to take 3 weeks and made it 3 days. So what does that mean? Well, when I first started this company, there were about 25 people. And by the time Christmas came, there must have been 150 people in the company. And everybody was really excited. We had a massive Christmas party. Everybody knew about it. I ran out and bought a tie. I'm pretty sure it's the only tie I've ever owned. So I went to this Christmas party, really excited. I get to the building, and I forgot to mention that the party is in a restaurant that's at the top floor of one of the tallest buildings in the city. So I get to the building, I get on the elevator. It turns out I'm on the elevator with the owner of the company. So we're going up this long elevator ride, and he goes, hey, you're that guy. You're that guy, wrote that software, helped the company. And I remember standing there with my tie on thinking, yeah, I guess I am. And then he said, well, you know, you probably should get paid more. You should probably get a raise. And I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, maybe I should. And so we get to the top floor of the building, right? The restaurant opens the door, all these people on the elevator, everybody's walking off, and the guy says, starting Monday, 50 cents more an hour. Those elevator doors closed, and I acted on an intuition that changed my life forever. I hit the lobby button. Because I decided at that point in time that anytime I was never again going to create something that I didn't share somehow in the success. Now, success isn't always wealth and monetary, but I wanted to share in the success. And so my lesson is that I acted. When I was standing in that elevator, I had a choice, and the doors were closed. I acted on an idea and an intuition that I had, and that was to press the lobby button and to change my life forever. So act, ask, and adapt. So that's what act means. What does ask mean? Well, to tell you what that means, I got to tell you a story. So it's 1988, it's 5 years later, and I'm starting a software company with 2 other people. And the software company, just to summarize, we were producing catalogs, printed catalogs, like real estate magazines and homes magazines and yearbooks. And what was unique about this software is we could actually produce the color images and the text all onto one electronic page and print it out. Now, this was pretty cutting edge stuff. This is 1988. So this is before Photoshop. This is really before Word. This is before my 9-year-old son can download pictures of Transformer on the internet, put them in Word, and print them on a color printer in my house. So this is all pretty complex stuff. And I feel like I'm a pretty good software developer, and my partner's a really good salesperson. And we sell, in the first 6 months, a major license to a major publisher. They produce like 150 real estate magazines. We're all excited. We drive up to New Jersey to their production center and start installing software. Because, in those days, you didn't just download the software and install it on the computer. You actually had to drive up and install and configure everything. So this is 1988. So we drove up and we'd install the software, and every day we would configure a couple more magazines. And every so often, we'd have a problem. We'd have a bug. There'd be a bug in the software. And so we'd be in the meeting, and I would be like, that's okay. I'll work tonight. I'll fix the bug. And my partner never left, always was around. If I was there until 3 a.m., he was there until 3 a.m. He'd bring pizzas and Cokes. He pretty much sat right next to me. So I just want to paint a picture for you. So there's me working on my software, and I got to just give you some perspective. So I'm working on the software, and it's complex stuff. I even think we got a patent for the color separation piece. So, it's pretty complex stuff. I think it's a pretty hard problem, and so I'm working on hard problems. And so at that point, it actually had been leading up, but at that point in time, I'm the smartest person in the world. I mean, the software is pretty complex. It's pretty hard to do. I'm solving a hard problem. We're getting paid loads of money to do it. I wrote the software. I must be the smartest person in the world. So my partner, every so often, he'd turn over to me and he'd say, maybe the problem we're having, maybe the bug, it's because I wore my blue socks instead of my pink socks. Sometimes he'd lean back in his chair and he'd say, maybe it's because my grandma makes the best peach cobbler in the state of North Carolina. Now the reality is that's not what he said, but that's what it sounded like to me. Because I was the smartest person in the world, working on a very complex problem, and what could he possibly say to me that would be relevant? But every so often he'd turn to me and he'd say, you know what, I think it's because you left a semicolon off your case statement in your code. And you know what, he was right. And he wasn't only exactly right, but oftentimes he would provide the puzzle piece that had all the rest of the pieces fall into place. So what's the lesson? The lesson for me was sometimes the greatest insight, sometimes the clearest explanation, sometimes the best solution, sometimes the spark for the innovation comes from people you might otherwise think know nothing about your problem. But what you have to do is to ask and to be quiet and to listen. So I've learned that innovation sometimes interconnects what are otherwise disconnected disciplines. And oftentimes when I'm sitting and thinking about a problem, my own intellect and my own experience sometimes clouds me from seeing the solution. And what I find is other people can come to it and can clearly see the answer and explain it to me. So when I say ask, I'm saying ask and listen. Sometimes you might be surprised by what you hear. So I said act, ask, and adapt. What do I mean by adapt? To tell you that, I got to tell you a story. So it's 1999, it's 11 years later, I'm 39 years old, and I start yet another company. It's an internet music or media company focused on the U.S. Hispanic market called Batanga. And every expert that I knew at the time told me Latinos are not online. And they told me Latinos watch Spanish TV and radio, and they might have been, but I really believed in what I thought, and I believed there was a rich, diverse group who would embrace thousands of Spanish language music stations streaming to them online. Now, let me put some perspective on this. This is 1999. Okay, so this is before Pandora. Actually, it's before Napster. It's before my mother-in-law knew what the word streaming meant. She comes to me now. She goes, "Oh, Troy, I just streamed the latest James Bond movie on Netflix." I was like, "How do you even know what that word means?" But she does, and so does everyone else. And so this is way before all that. This is in 1999. And so I want to create thousands of music stations for this audience. And what am I going to do? I'm going to act. And what do I have to do first? I got to make one. So I set up a computer in my house, and I go down to the Borders bookstore, and I buy every Latin music CD that's in the section. Because I'm going to rip them into MP3 files, and I'm going to stream them online, and I'm going to get started. So I do. I go down to Borders, and I pick up all the Latin CDs in the bin, which is kind of funny. I don't know how much you know about this, but so I pick up all these Latin music CDs, and there's Maná and Juanes, which is rock en español. And there's Don Omar, which is reggaeton. And there's Luis Miguel, which is Latino pop. And there's Celia Cruz, who's salsa and merengue. Now, none of these music genres are really even related, and same people don't always listen to them. But and the fact that they were all in one bin, that's kind of the problem I was trying to solve. So I scoop them all up, and I'm walking up to the counter, and I'm buying them, and it turns out the cashier behind the counter is Latino. He sees me with all my CDs and buying all these CDs, and he's like, "What are you doing?" So I'm learned my lesson. I'm acting, but I ask. So I tell him what I'm doing. I tell him about what I think about the Latino population. I tell him what I think about streaming music online. I tell him about what I think Batanga is going to become. And he goes, "Well, that's really a good idea, but you know, I like Juanes, but I like Green Day too. And I like Luis Miguel, but I like Mariah Carey too." And suddenly it hits me. Batanga is not about Spanish language music streaming to online Latinos. It's about delivering music that Latinos love. It's about being a media company that represented what the U.S. Hispanic market, what the Latino market was becoming in the U.S. and has become. Because yes, we're going to pull from all kinds of cultural traditions. We're going to pull language, and we're going to pull tradition. We're going to pull history. We're going to pull culture. But they're going to embrace what they find here and create something that is uniquely American. So that's what Batanga became. After the first year, we had about 100,000 listeners. And after 3 years, we had about 1 million listeners. And by 2007, when I sold it, we had almost 100 employees. But that idea, that adaptation, that change came from that cashier. It came from me acting, it came from me asking, and it came from me adapting to what he had suggested to me. So act, ask, and adapt. 3 lessons that I'm sharing with you that I've learned over the last 25 years in starting companies. Act. I've never been afraid to act on my intuition. Never been afraid to act on my idea. And so you yourself might have an idea, something that you want to do, something that you think you should be doing, something you actually might be doing today. All I can share with you is that for me, acting is the first step. Ask. Well, you're really smart, and I'm really smart, and we can all be smart together. And if I stop and ask and I listen, sometimes I'm amazed at what I can learn and what comes from it. And then adapt. If I'm acting and I'm asking, I've got to take that feedback and incorporate change. I have to change. I have to change my product, my company, my brand, even my life. Act, ask, and adapt. Thank you.